So this is the iPhone XR, Apple's sister phone to the 2018 iPhone XS, and due to the price point, as well as this being the first affordable notched iPhone, this thing has kind of developed almost a cult following over the years. So, all these years later, should you still buy an iPhone XR in 2021, or should you look for something else? Let's find out. First off, as always, we have the specs. The iPhone XR features an Apple A12 Bionic processor, so it is nice that it got the same as the much more expensive iPhone XS counterpart. However, it does have 3 gigs of RAM compared to the iPhone XS's 4 gigabytes, and we're going to be talking more about what this means in terms of performance later on. The iPhone XR also has multiple storage options, including 64, 128, and 256 gigabytes. I myself only have 64 gigabytes because really that's all I need, but if you do need more, then it's nice to know that you have the option of upgradability. There are also multiple colors, including white, red, blue, yellow, coral, and the one I have here. Actually, it's in my pocket. Black. It weighs in at 194 grams, which is a little on the heavy side, although I've never had any issues with it, and a battery size of 2,942 milliamp hours. We're going to be talking more about the performance later on, as well as some other specs like the screen resolution. Those are going to come in their respective sections later on, but that's pretty much it for the specs. In terms of design, the iPhone XR features that glass and 7000 series aluminium that has been common on iPhones for many years now, and while it is nice and premium feeling, I do recommend a case. I just smashed my iPhone 12 mainly because I was careless, but it does go to show that accidents can happen. So yeah, if you're prone to dropping your phone like I am, I probably recommend using the case on this thing. As we can see, there are also some scratches around the camera, which is unfortunately common due to the fact that it sticks out so much. But if we look closely, then there aren't actually any on the camera lens, so it's nice to know that there is some kind of protection as far as the lens goes. It also features an IP67 water resistance rating, meaning it can survive in up to a meter of water for 30 minutes. And as long as you remember this and only use it as a safeguard, then you shouldn't really have much trouble with water. Overall, design and build quality is pretty nice. I mean, it's still made out of those nice premium materials. The slightly heavier weight actually does add to that premium feeling, but as always, probably get a case. Moving on, we have the screen. On release, the XR was mocked for the low resolution of 1792 by 828, along with the fact that it's an LCD panel, not OLED like the higher end iPhones. However, due to the 6.1-inch screen size, from at least most viewing angles that you'd use this phone, I really haven't noticed. It's got a PPI of 326 and a typical peak brightness of 650 nits, and honestly, after using it for ages now, I really haven't had any issues with it. Whether I'm watching videos or using it in bright light, it's been pretty fantastic. The notch design and wider panels means that watching films shot in that traditional 21:9 aspect ratio means that there's significantly less crop, and watching wider aspect ratio YouTube videos like this 18:9 one means that you're going to have to crop off significantly less of the sides if you want to zoom in. So yeah, pretty nice. It also features True Tone, which has been one of my favorite features on iPhones for a little while now, despite me not using it on my Mac, as well as haptic touch. While not quite as tactile feeling or responsive as the 3D touch on the iPhone XS, I do still like it, and I find it quite useful as a secondary interaction tool. Overall, despite the lackluster specs, LCD panel, and slightly bigger than I prefer size, the panel on the iPhone XR is still pretty decent. Honestly, I think for most people, as long as you're okay with that 6.1-inch size, honestly, you really shouldn't have a problem. Up next, we have button placement, which is pretty standard as far as notched iPhones go. We got the isolated lock button, separate volume up and down buttons, and the mute switch. All the buttons feel nice and tactile, well thought out, and there's nothing unnecessary. So overall, I have pretty much no problems with it other than my usual notched iPhone gripes like the lock button being hold for Siri. Also, if you have smaller hands, then it may be a little bit of a challenge using this thing one-handed like it was for me at the start. After 1 week, I got completely used to it. However, as always, I do still personally prefer the 5.8-inch design. But yeah, overall, good button layout. Following this, we have the biometrics unlock method for the iPhone XR, which just happens to be Face ID. While it's certainly not as snappy as something like an iPhone 11 or 12, with it lacking the angles that you can unlock your phone at least compared to these models, it's still a pretty phenomenal example of what face unlock technology should be. It's fast, accurate, works in low light, and while, as always with these iPhones, a secondary method like an under-screen fingerprint scanner would have been nice, overall, yeah, pretty damn impressed with the Face ID. The camera is one of the most important parts of the modern smartphone experience, and honestly, on the surface, kinda looks like the iPhone X's lacking. I mean, it only has one camera, it's nothing special as it is, but how much of an issue is this really? As I previously said, the iPhone XR features one 12-megapixel f1.8 wide-angle camera, and again, while on the surface this may not seem like much, due to some processing magic with that Apple A12 chip, some of the photos I've been able to get on this phone have genuinely shocked me with how good they've turned out. Obviously, you do lose the flexibility that comes with multiple camera systems. However, the colors here look really nice, there's a decent amount of dynamic range, plenty of sharpness, and overall, photo performance on the XR has been pretty impressive. Unfortunately though, the portrait mode on this phone was severely handicapped, because while it is included, it's only available on people rather than anything, which is a massive shame to me because I really like using the portrait mode to get those nice blurry background photos on any old inanimate object. Must be said though, it's nice and accurate when you're taking pictures of people, and I mean, there's always halide, but yeah, you probably should be aware of that. There's also a front-facing camera on this phone with a resolution of 7 megapixels, an aperture of f2.2, and this can be used to get some nice selfies. Again, portrait mode does work here on humans, and while the photo quality isn't going to be as good as on the main camera, for, well, selfie camera is going to do just fine. Moving on to video, which I obviously enjoy a lot, the iPhone XR shoots 4K video at up to 60 FPS, which is good for some of that slightly slow motion, ultra smooth handheld video that I'm a big fan of, along with 1080p video that goes up to 240 FPS in slow motion. Although, seriously, I'd recommend staying in 120 FPS unless you really need those higher frame rates, purely because the image quality is noticeably better. The front-facing camera on the XR doesn't shoot 4K, just 1080p at up to 60 FPS, but realistically, do you need 4K in your front-facing camera? I mean, sure, it's a nice to have, certainly on the higher-end iPhones, but in situations where you want to either post to social media or you want some quick vlogging action, the front-facing camera on the XR will do just fine, but if you really need that higher quality front-facing camera, I'd personally recommend taking a look at the XS. Overall, to summarize this section, while the portrait mode is lacking, there's only one focal length and there's no new features like night mode or 4K video on that front-facing camera. For most people who take casual photos of their friends or days out or food, I don't know. The camera on the iPhone XR will certainly be good enough. And as I said, I actually managed to get some pretty nice shots out of this thing. Up next, we have the category that I personally consider to be the most important aspect of smartphones, the OS and app performance. The iPhone XR was released in 2018 with iOS 12, so if we take a look at Apple's typical trends, this phone should last until 2023, which is honestly pretty impressive. So if you buy this phone today, you really don't need to worry about it going out of date anytime soon. In terms of OS performance, performing functions like using secondary interactions or scrolling through menus, this phone feels as snappy as any other iPhone released today. So no issues here. But what about that 3GB of RAM I mentioned earlier? How does that affect performance? Well, due to the fact that so much of what makes iPhones fast is on the OS side of things, and seeing as the OS support isn't going anywhere anytime soon like we previously talked about, it's been pretty great. Yes, the screen is lower resolution than the flagship iPhones released today, but whether I'm watching high resolution videos or playing games, I haven't had any issues with the performance really, and it should stay this way for a long time, which honestly, pretty nice. Going back to the hardware for a minute, we have these speakers. The XR features that stereo technology which came in with the iPhone 7, utilizing both the top and bottom speaker to create a wider, louder sound, and while I'm doing tasks like washing up or preparing to cook something, I have used this phone to listen to music and it served me well. It does like the headphone jack and doesn't seem to be as good as later phones like the 11 or 12, but for casually listening to music or watching videos, the iPhone XR does a fine job. Finally, we have the battery life, which is an interesting one. In fact, I remember a lot of people raving about the battery life of this phone when it was released. As we already said, this phone has a capacity of 2,942 milliamp hours, so fairly large as iPhones go, but not all that massive. I don't know whether it's the screen or some magic with the processing, but the battery life on this phone is pretty stunning. I can easily get through my day on one charge, and while this will degrade over time, throughout my day-to-day usage with the iPhone X, I've never had any problems, which is often the case with Apple's budget offering. Yeah, nothing but good things in this department, apart from the fact that it lacks MagSafe, which I don't use anyway, so As I said at the start of this video, the XR has developed almost a cult-like following over the years. A nice selection of features and the value on launch meant that this phone cemented itself as one of Apple's fan favorites, and if you want to pick up this thing in 2021, you can get it at an even lower price. If you want a modern-ish iPhone without breaking the bank, I think the iPhone XR is a pretty safe place to put your money in 2021. Alright guys, so that's it for today. I hope you've enjoyed this one. Let me know, by the way, do you have an iPhone XR? Are you planning to pick one up? Feel free to let me know in the comments. I always enjoy reading those. As for now though, as always, thank you for watching. Remember to like the video if you want to see more content like this, and smash that subscribe button. I'm done for now, and I will see you guys in the next one.